There is belief, and then there is skepticism. And between those two lies a vast territory of questions and the unknown. But what if reality is far more complex than we've been willing to perceive? And what if the stories that we dismissed as myth and legend hold the keys to understanding consciousness? From ghostly encounters to mysterious lights in the sky, humanity has always sensed there was something more out there. Some call it the paranormal, and others call it the divine. Some search the stars for answers, while others look within. They are all connected, threads in the grand tapestry of life. But we stand at a place where the fabric between realities is much thinner than you might think, because this is Crossroads of the Veil. We stand at an intersection, a strange and foggy crossroads, where the things we know meet the things we will never understand. We are here to peer into a subject so familiar, so much a part of our daily lives, that we have forgotten to see how profoundly strange it truly is. It's a technology we interact with every single day, often before we've even had our first cup of coffee and before you even speak your first word of the day. It's an object of simple utility, a quiet piece of home decor. It is a simple, everyday object. It is a silent, passive servant. You trust it to show you a simple truth. It tells you without judgment. But what if I told you it's more than that? What if that simple truth is just the beginning of a much deeper, darker story? What if I told you that this object was a door, or even possibly a gateway? And what if its passivity is a carefully constructed lie? What if it's a silent witness to secrets humanity was never meant to know? What if the thing you trust to show you the simple, surface-level truth is a carefully constructed illusion, masking a reality that is far more complex and terrifying? What if it doesn't just show you what is, but also what could be, or what should not be? The history of humanity is a history of looking at things. It is the story of our endless quest of observing the world and trying to understand our place in it. But of all the things we have ever looked at, nothing has ever looked back at us with such unnerving, absolute fidelity as our own reflection. We're talking, of course, about the mirror. Before the polished, volcanic glass of the ancient world, and long before the silvered glass that hangs in your hallway today, there was the still, dark surface of a pond. This was the first mirror. It wasn't manufactured, it was discovered. Because it wasn't a possession you could simply own or carry. It was a place, a sacred and mysterious place you had to journey to. Tens of thousands of years ago, when one of our distant ancestors first knelt to drink. Try to imagine the scene. The oppressive heat of the afternoon sun beating down on their back, the low buzz of insects in the air, the dry earth beneath their hands and knees. They are driven by a primal thirst for water. As they lower their head to the cool, dark water, they are confronted by something that shatters their simple understanding of reality. For the very first time, they see a face. Not the familiar face of a tribe member or a rival, but their own. A perfect twin stares back from an inverted, watery world. The being in the water is a perfect copy, mimicking their every flicker of confusion, their every jolt of sudden, heart-stopping fear. In that silent moment, there was a reflection of our perceived self. Or was it seen as something else entirely? Was it a spirit of the water, a god emerging from the depths to greet them? Or was it a demon, a trickster looking to pull them down into the muddy darkness? That primal encounter, that silent, watery conversation between a person and their own image, gave birth to some of our oldest questions and most enduring fears. The ancient Greeks, a civilization obsessed with beauty, tragedy, and the puzzles of the human condition, gave us the perfect myth to encapsulate this primal danger. The story of Narcissus. He was a youth of such impossible beauty that everyone who saw him fell instantly in love. But he was proud and cold, and he rejected them all. As a punishment for his cruelty, the goddess of revenge, Nemesis, lured him to a still, clear pond. There he knelt to drink. And just like our ancient ancestor, he saw his own reflection for the first time. We dismiss it today as a simple tale of vanity, a cautionary fable for the self-obsessed. But to do so is to miss its profound and foundational warning, a recognition of the soul-trapping power of that image. Narcissus didn't just like what he saw or admire his reflection. He fell hopelessly and fatally in love with it. He saw in that watery surface a perfect companion, a being who would never disappoint him, who would never speak a harsh word. He saw a perfection that the real world could never offer. His story is not about arrogance. It is about the soul becoming ensnared, trapped, and ultimately consumed by its own image. It is a story of a man who is consumed by his own duplicate, a strange and horrible form of spiritual cannibalism where the self is devoured by the other self. He tried to embrace the image, but found only cold water. He tried to speak to it, but it could only mouth his own words back at him. So he stayed there at the water's edge, refusing to eat or drink, so captivated by the beautiful illusion that he wasted away and died, his essence transforming into the flower that still bears his name. This is the central paradox of the mirror. It shows us ourselves, but it does so by presenting an inverted, unreachable copy, a phantom twin. You can never touch your reflection. You can never hold its hand. It exists in a world that is a perfect replica of our own, yet is forever sealed away from us by an invisible, unbreakable wall. This unsettling truth has echoed through the ages, whispered in folklore and debated by philosophers. It is the silent question that every mirror asks. Who are you, and who is the silent partner on the other side of the glass? Tonight our journey begins at that water's edge, but we will travel from the shaman's scrying bowl to the physicist's theoretical mirror world, asking the same questions that have haunted us for millennia. What is a reflection? Is it just a trick of light? A simple phenomenon of physics that we have long since mastered and explained away? Or is it a window to the soul, an ethereal snapshot of our innermost essence? What is the world that lies behind the glass, and why do we instinctively feel deep in our bones that something or someone can cross that threshold? Join me as we step through the looking glass. The sprawling mythology of the mirror, every superstition, every ritual, every whispered fear, is built on one single powerful idea. Your reflection is not just an image. It is not simply light bouncing off a surface, a trick of optics your science teacher explained in middle school. No, the old belief is much more profound. It insists that your reflection is a tangible, spiritual extension of you. It is your soul, captured in the reflection. For countless cultures throughout history, this was a fact, as real and as self-evident as the rising of the sun. The fact that this shared human intuition, a conclusion reached independently by cultures separated by vast oceans and entire continents, tells us something profound about our deep primal relationship with our own image. Consider the ancient Romans, a practical and powerful people, pioneers in crafting glass mirrors. Imagine a wealthy Roman in her villa early in the morning. The sun streams into the atrium. A servant holds up a mirror, not of clear glass like ours, but of polished bronze or a sheet of glass backed with lead. The image is wavy, dark, and mysterious. As she looks at her face, she isn't just checking to see if her elaborate hairstyle is in place. She is utterly convinced that the dim, wavering image she sees is a literal representation of her soul, an ethereal double that lives within the reflective plane. To the Roman mind, the soul was a delicate, vaporous substance, a kind of sacred breath, and the mirror was a unique technology that had the power to interact with it directly. When you looked into a mirror, you were engaging in a silent communion with your own spirit. This made the mirror an incredibly powerful object, one to be treated with a mixture of utility and deep respect. To handle it carelessly was to disrespect your own soul. This idea reaches its most profound level in the Shinto tradition of Japan. There's a powerful belief that the very first time you gaze into a mirror, a piece of your spirit, your divine essence, is irrevocably transferred into it. This act forges a permanent and unbreakable link between you and that object. From that moment on, the mirror is no longer just an object. It is a sacred container for a fragment of your own divinity. This is why mirrors are treated with such importance in Japanese culture. This concept is so central that one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan, the nation's most sacred treasures, is a mirror called the Yata no Kagami. The myth behind it is one of the most important stories in Japanese culture. The legend says that the sun goddess, Amaterasu, became so angry with her brother's destructive behavior that she hid herself in a deep cave, plunging the entire universe into a cold and terrifying darkness. The other gods gathered outside the cave, trying everything to lure her out, but nothing worked. Finally, they devised a clever plan. They hung a beautiful, newly forged mirror from a tree just outside the cave entrance and began to celebrate, laugh, and dance. At the sounds of merriment, she peeked out. The other gods held up the mirror. Seeing her own brilliant, radiant reflection for the first time, she was so astonished and entranced by her own light that she stepped out of the cave, and in that moment, light was restored to the universe. She later gave this very mirror to the imperial family, saying, "Serve this mirror as my soul, just as you would serve me." To this day, mirrors in Shinto shrines are often considered the Shintai, which means the physical bodies of the gods. To look into a Shinto mirror is to see the god, and in seeing the god, to see the divine spark that exists within yourself. The reflection is a bridge between the human and the divine. Once you understand this core principle that reflection equals soul, a lot of strange beliefs from around the world start to make perfect sense. They cease to be random superstitions and reveal themselves as the logical consequences of a coherent worldview. Think about the classic vampire legend, a story that has haunted our nightmares for centuries. Why can't a vampire cast a reflection? The answer is simple and profound. Because it has no soul. A vampire is an empty vessel, a walking corpse animated by an unholy force. It is a shell of a person with nothing inside. The mirror, acting as an incorruptible arbiter of spiritual truth, simply reports what it does not see. If there is no soul to capture, the mirror remains disturbingly empty. Imagine a grand candlelit ballroom in a Victorian mansion. Dashing figures in fine clothes waltz across the polished floor. But as one particularly charming dark-haired gentleman glides past the enormous mirrors lining the walls, the reflection shows his dancing partner turning in the arms of nothing, an empty space. It's a simple, terrifying logic that turns the mirror into a tool of the righteous, a way to identify the monster hiding in human form. It cannot be fooled by charm, glamour, or a handsome face. It sees only the truth of the soul. This belief also explains the old and surprisingly widespread superstition that it's dangerous for a baby to see its reflection before its first birthday. The idea is that an infant's soul is still new, fragile, and not yet fully anchored to its physical body. It's like a newly planted seed that hasn't yet taken firm root in the earth. To expose such a delicate, untethered essence to the powerful, capturing properties of a mirror is to risk profound spiritual harm. The mirror, with its soul-catching power, might pull the underdeveloped soul away from the body, leading to a condition often described as failure to thrive. Some traditions believed a mirror could cause a stutter, as if damaging the soul's connection to the voice. Grandmothers or village elders might remove mirrors from cradles due to a traditional understanding of the mirror as a risk. But this power could also be harnessed for good. In some traditions in Africa, mirrors were not feared, but were revered as sacred instruments used in powerful initiation rituals. An initiate, often a young person on the cusp of adulthood, would be led by a shaman into a sacred space. Under the influence of hallucinogenic plants that open their minds to the spirit world, they would be made to gaze into a mirror. The flickering firelight would dance on the reflective surface. The goal was not for the initiate to see their own face, but to see the face of a revered ancestor staring back. This isn't just a vision, it is a powerful act of identification. It was a tangible message from the past, reinforcing the unbroken line of the lineage, a direct link between the living and the dead, facilitated through the reflective gateway. The mirror, in this context, is a powerful instrument for building identity, for understanding one's place in the long chain of existence that stretches back into the mists of time. Of all the superstitions surrounding mirrors, one is almost universally known, even by the most skeptical among us. It's a ghost of an old fear that still lingers in our modern world. Break a mirror, and you're cursed with 7 years of bad luck. It's a phrase that has become a part of our lexicon, a throwaway line used after a minor accident, usually followed by a nervous laugh, but it originates from a place of genuine terror. And that number 7 isn't just random. It's a direct and logical consequence of that foundational belief we just discussed, that the reflection is the soul, combined with an ancient view of life's cycles. The belief traces back directly to the Roman Empire. As we learned, the Romans, pioneers in glass mirror technology, were the ones who first codified the idea that your reflection was a literal image of your soul. But they also held a specific belief that life, health, and the soul itself regenerated in 7-year cycles. This idea likely stemmed from early common-sense observations of human development, the loss of baby teeth and the growth of adult teeth around age 7, the dramatic changes of puberty around age 14, and the arrival of legal and social adulthood at 21. To them, life wasn't a smooth line, but a series of 7-year chapters. So, when a mirror was broken, the consequences were dire. Imagine a Roman servant in a wealthy household polishing a prized mirror. His hand slips, and the mirror crashes to the marble floor, shattering into a dozen pieces. The terror he feels is not just because he will be punished for destroying a valuable object. It is a deeper, more spiritual fear. The soul reflection that was trapped inside the glass wasn't just cracked. It was violently shattered. This was a profound spiritual injury, a fragmentation of the self at its most essential level. The individual whose reflection had been broken was now incomplete, their spiritual essence scattered like the shards on the floor. According to this belief, they had to suffer through a full 7-year cycle of misfortune, while their soul slowly regenerated and became whole again. The bad luck wasn't a punishment from an angry God. It was a symptom. It was the natural, unavoidable consequence of navigating the world with a fragmented spiritual self, just as a person with a broken leg would find it difficult to walk or run. Your luck was bad because your soul, the very engine of your fate and fortune, was broken. It's a surprisingly sophisticated pre-modern understanding of psychological trauma. The breaking of the mirror is a perfect metaphor for an event that shatters your sense of self, your security, or your identity. And the 7 years represents the long, arduous period of healing and recovery that is often required. It's an ancient acknowledgement that deep wounds, whether spiritual or psychological, do not heal overnight. The fear of this curse was so real that people developed a whole series of elaborate rituals and countermeasures designed to avert bad luck. These cures are fascinating because they reveal a complex understanding of magical principles that feel almost like early psychotherapy. They weren't passive prayers. They were active, participatory steps taken to reclaim one's spiritual well-being. One of the most common remedies was destruction. The afflicted person had to carefully gather every single piece of the broken mirror, leaving not even the smallest sliver behind. Then they had to grind them into a fine, harmless dust. Imagine the slow, deliberate work with a mortar and pestle, the sharp crunching sound giving way to a soft whisper as the glass becomes powder. The logic is elegant in its magical thinking. If no surface remains that can reflect an image, then no fragmented reflection of the soul can be captured. The curse is neutralized at its source. Psychologically, it's a powerful act. It's a way of taking the sharp, painful fragments of a traumatic past and processing them so thoroughly that they lose their power to reflect a broken image of the self back at you. Another set of practices involved purification. The broken pieces were to be taken out of the home and returned to the cleansing forces of the natural world. Burying the fragments was a common method, especially under the light of a full moon, a time associated with magic and transformation. The earth would absorb the negative energy, placing the shattered soul beyond the reach of evil spirits that might prey on it. An even more potent version of this ritual involved throwing the pieces into a south-running stream. The direction was important. South was often seen as a sacred direction, a direction of warmth and life. The powerful running water was believed to physically carry the bad luck and the spiritual fragments away, cleansing them and washing the curse downstream, far away from the victim. These are profound rituals of letting go, of surrendering the fragmented self to the healing powers of nature, allowing the earth or the water to take the burden from you. And then there's the simplest, most immediate antidote, a folk remedy of defense that has survived to this day, throwing a pinch of salt over your left shoulder. This seemingly simple act is loaded with ancient symbolism. It comes from the belief that the devil, or some other malevolent spirit, always lurks over your left shoulder, the sinister side, waiting for a moment of weakness, an opportunity to strike. The breaking of a mirror is a moment of profound spiritual vulnerability. Your defenses are down. Your soul is injured. This is the perfect time for evil to enter your life. The salt, a timeless symbol of purity, preservation, and incorruptibility, a substance so valuable it was once used as currency, is thrown directly into the entity's face. It is a quick, sharp, defensive act of spiritual self-defense, a way of saying get back and warding off evil at the precise moment you are most susceptible to it. Destruction, purification, and defense. 3 different methods, all aimed at one single goal: healing a fractured soul and restoring the delicate balance of a person's life. If the mirror is truly connected to the soul, if it can capture our spiritual essence, and its shattering can injure us, then it stands to reason that it would become a particularly potent and dangerous object during times of profound spiritual transition. I'm talking about the ultimate moments of change, the moments of birth and death. During these liminal periods, when the veil between worlds is considered to be at its thinnest, when souls are either entering or leaving our physical plane, the mirror's inherent properties are believed to be amplified. It ceases to be a simple household object and becomes an active, powerful force at the very border of existence. The most widely known of these precautions, a tradition that still survives in many cultures, is the act of covering all the mirrors in a house where someone has died. This is a key part of the Jewish mourning ritual of sitting Shiva, but the practice is found all over the world, from the grand manors of Victorian England to the humble cabins of folk traditions in the American South. When you dig into the folklore, you find that this single simple act is a shield against a complex of ancient and overlapping fears. First and most importantly, there is the fear for the soul of the deceased. The belief is that when the soul leaves the body, it is disoriented, confused, and not yet fully detached from its earthly life. It might wander the home for a time, visiting familiar rooms, before it fully passes on to the next world. If during this vulnerable in-between period it should encounter a reflective surface, it risks becoming trapped inside. The mirror, with its natural soul-catching nature, could act like a spiritual spiderweb, ensnaring the confused spirit and preventing it from completing its journey. To trap a soul this way is a terrible fate, leaving it stuck between worlds, unable to find peace. In some Chinese traditions, this belief is so strong that it's considered gravely dangerous to even carry a corpse past an uncovered mirror, lest its soul be instantly captured and twisted into a restless, earthbound ghost. Second, there is a fear for the living. The presence of death infects a house, casting a spiritual shadow over everything within it. In German and Dutch folklore, it was believed that if you saw your own reflection in a mirror in a house of the recently deceased, it was a terrible omen. It meant you would be the next to die. Imagine you are paying your respects to a grieving family. The house is quiet and heavy with sorrow. You pass through the hallway and inadvertently catch your own eye in a small forgotten mirror on the wall. A cold dread washes over you. It was as if the mirror, now charged with the potent energy of death, had the power to reach out and mark its next victim. Seeing your reflection in that space was like having a curse laid upon you, a fatal glimpse into your own not-too-distant future. And third, there is the fear of what might come in from the outside. A death creates a spiritual vacuum in a household. The normal, protective energies of the living are weakened by grief and sorrow. Mystical traditions, like the Kabbalah, teach that this void can act as an open invitation for malevolent spirits or demons. The fabric of reality is thinner in a house of mourning, and the mirror, already understood as a potential gateway between worlds, becomes the most likely and most dangerous point of entry. It is a shimmering, unguarded door. Covering it is the spiritual equivalent of locking the doors and bolting the windows during a violent storm. It's a necessary act of security. These 3 distinct fears, the trapping of the departing soul, the issuing of death omens to the living, and the threat of demonic intrusion, are all part of the profound anxiety that death creates. The simple, respectful act of covering the mirror with a white sheet serves as a crucial, multi-purpose ward against these dangers. It is an act of compassion for the dead, an act of prudence for the living, and an act of spiritual fortification for the home itself. And this liminal danger isn't just confined to the end of life. A similar, though less common, superstition warns that a woman who has just given birth should avoid looking in a mirror for a period of time. Why? Because the site of a birth is another place where the boundary between worlds has been breached. A new soul has just crossed over into our plane. The mother, depleted and spiritually open from the ordeal of childbirth, is considered to be in a highly sensitive and vulnerable state. If she were to look into a mirror during this time, it is believed she might see more than just her own tired face reflected back. She might see the ghostly faces of spirits who were drawn to the momentous, powerful event of birth, peering from behind her own reflection. These could be benevolent ancestral spirits, eager to welcome the newborn, or they could be something far more sinister, eager to influence or harm the brand new soul that has just arrived. The mirror once again becomes a window onto a world that is usually hidden from our view. So far, we've talked about the mirror in a mostly passive role, as a container for the soul, a silent record of our spiritual essence, an object that can become dangerous under certain circumstances. But there is a parallel tradition, just as ancient and just as powerful, that treats the mirror as an active instrument. It is not something that simply is. It is something that you use. In this paradigm, the mirror is a tool, a technology of the arcane arts, deliberately employed to pierce the veil between worlds. It is no longer a household object with dangerous properties. It is a piece of ritual equipment as essential to the magician as the wand or the book of spells. The art of divining the future by gazing into a reflective surface is known as scrying, and when a mirror is the chosen medium, the specific art is called cadaptromancy. The ancient Greeks practiced it with a seriousness we can barely imagine. Seers would travel to sacred wells and springs, places where the water was believed to have prophetic qualities. They would lower specially consecrated mirrors, often made of polished bronze, into the water on a thread. After prayers and rituals, they would interpret the images that appeared on the water-kissed, distorted surface. They believed the gods themselves would paint prophetic visions onto the glass, offering cryptic clues about the future of a harvest, the outcome of a battle, or the fate of a king. In Mesoamerica, the Aztec and Maya elite used mirrors crafted from a single highly polished volcanic obsidian. These were not vanity items, they were objects of immense spiritual power. Their dark glassy surfaces absorbed light rather than merely reflecting it, creating a reflection of unsettling depth, like looking into a pool of black water. They were ritual implements of the highest order, seen as direct conduits to the spirit world. They were particularly associated with the supreme and terrifying Aztec god Tezcatlipoca, whose name literally means smoking mirror. He was a complex god of prophecy, discord, war, and omniscience. He was a trickster and a creator, a god who could see everything that happened in the world. To look into an obsidian mirror was to look into the eye of Tezcatlipoca himself. It was to risk madness and ruin for a glimpse of profound, forbidden knowledge. An Aztec high priest, clad in brilliant feathers and jade, would retreat to a darkened chamber in a high temple, light incense, and gaze into the smoky depths of the mirror, seeking guidance from his powerful, unpredictable god. Perhaps the most famous practitioner in the Western world was the brilliant Elizabethan scholar and magician Dr. John Dee. A respected mathematician, astronomer, and a trusted advisor to Queen Elizabeth, Dee was one of the great minds of his age, but he was also a dedicated occultist, obsessed with communicating with a higher intelligence, with the angels themselves. Alongside his scryer, a controversial figure named Edward Kelly, Dee used a polished obsidian mirror to conduct extensive ritual communications with beings he firmly believed to be angels. Imagine the fire-lit gloom of Dee's study in London, a room overflowing with arcane books, strange alchemical instruments, and astrological charts. Kelly, a man with a troubled past, would gaze intently into the dark mirror, his face illuminated by a single candle. He would fall into a trance and begin to describe, in an otherworldly voice, the beings and the complex geometric symbols appearing within the mirror's smoky depths. Meanwhile, D, the meticulous scholar, would sit at his desk, hastily transcribing everything, filling book after book with these angelic communications. Through this method, they claim to have received volumes of information, including a complex and complete angelic language known as Enochian, complete with its own alphabet and syntax. Here's where the story gets a fascinating and historically verified twist. That very mirror, John Dee's spirit mirror, was not lost to time. It is now housed in the British Museum. An analysis has confirmed that the obsidian it's made from isn't from Europe or anywhere nearby. It's an authentic Aztec artifact, crafted in Mesoamerica and likely brought to Europe as plunder after the Spanish conquest. Think about the staggering implications of that. An object with a specific, deeply embedded ritual meaning in one culture, Aztec divination, to commune with the god of the smoking mirror, was adopted and repurposed within a completely different magical system, Renaissance Hermeticism, to contact a completely different set of beings, in this case Judeo-Christian angels. It suggests that the form of the arcane tool was seen as universally effective for piercing the veil. It implies that the mirror itself possesses an inherent power, a resonant frequency that allows it to function as an antenna for supernatural communication, regardless of the practitioner's specific beliefs or cultural context. The technology, it seems, worked for both the Aztec priest and the English magician. The mirror, it seems, just works. The idea of the mirror as an instrument for receiving visions is one thing. That could perhaps be explained away as a form of self-hypnosis. But there's a deeper, more unsettling layer to this belief that pushes the boundaries of our understanding. Beyond just receiving visions, the mirror is often seen in paranormal lore as a literal physical portal between dimensions. In this view, the mirror world isn't a metaphor for the soul or the subconscious. It's a tangible place, a parallel reality, and things can come through. The glass is not a window to be looked through, but a door to be opened. Paranormal investigators frequently identify mirrors as hotspots for supernatural activity. One theory is that a mirror, over decades or even centuries, can absorb the energies of its environment. It's like a silent, ghostly recording device. It silently witnesses every argument, every birth, every laugh, every tear, and every death that occurs in front of it. Over time, it can become a sort of spiritual battery, saturated with the emotional residue of its previous owners. An old mirror that hung in a happy home might radiate a sense of peace, but one that witnessed tragedy or violence could hold on to that dark energy. This accumulated energy can thin the veil between our world and the spirit world, turning the mirror into an unstable conduit for spirits. An old tarnished mirror bought at a flea market might not just be a charming antique to hang in your hallway. It could be a Trojan horse carrying the baggage of its past into the sanctity of your home. People report seeing fleeting shapes in such mirrors, or faces that are not their own looking back at them for just a second. There's a particularly potent configuration for creating such a gateway, a piece of paranormal folk wisdom that warns against placing two mirrors so they face each other. The infinite regression this creates, that endless tunnel of reflections you see, is more than just a visual curiosity. It is described as a vortex. The endless tunnel of reflections is believed to create an energetic hall of mirrors, a dimensional corridor that can attract spirits and other entities. It is considered an open invitation, a shining beacon for any entity looking for a way into our world. Imagine creating an endless, shimmering hallway in your home that leads directly to the spirit realm. It's a profoundly unsettling idea. The Stanley Hotel in Colorado, the very place that inspired Stephen King to write his terrifying novel The Shining, reportedly has an area in its concert hall known as the Vortex. In this spot, several large old mirrors face one another, creating this infinite effect. It is considered one of the most paranormally active locations in the notoriously haunted hotel. Tour guides and ghost hunters claim it's a known hotspot for spirit photography, a place where strange anomalies, orbs of light, and even full-bodied apparitions are frequently captured in photographs and on video. They warn visitors not to stare into the mirrors for too long. This modern paranormal concept has a powerful and surprisingly direct precursor in the Chinese myth of the Mirror Kingdom. This is recorded by the writer Jorge Luis Borges. It is a complete mythological cosmology built around the idea of a mirror world. It is not just a superstition, but a full-blown story of a lost history. According to this legend, the world behind the mirror is a separate reality, inhabited by strange creatures distinct from humanity. Once, long, long ago, in a forgotten age, the creatures of the Mirror Kingdom and the world of men could pass freely between the two realms. The mirror was not a barrier, but an open door. But the mirror creatures were chaotic and invasive, and they brought strife to our world. After a great war, the legendary Yellow Emperor, a god king of immense power, defeated the mirror creatures and imprisoned them behind the glass. He bound them with a powerful magical spell that stripped them of their power and forced them to do one thing, and one thing only: to mimic our every move. They became our slavish, silent duplicates, cursed to repeat our actions for all eternity. The myth, however, comes with a chilling warning. It foretells that one day, the spell will weaken. The creatures of the Mirror Kingdom will not be our prisoners forever. These beings will begin to awaken from their long slumber. At first, their stirring will be subtle, perceived only as faint, impossible movements, seen from the corner of your eye, a reflection that moves a fraction of a second too late, a hand that seems to drop just after yours does. Then, the legend warns, the color and shape of the reflections will begin to differ from the real objects. A blue cup might appear greenish in the glass. A straight line might seem slightly curved. And finally, the creatures will gather their strength, break through the surface of the glass, and swarm into our world to do battle with humanity once more. This story is a sophisticated mythological explanation for that deeply unsettling feeling we sometimes get from our own reflection. That momentary glitch in perception when your own face looks alien, when it doesn't quite feel like your own. The myth tells us that this feeling is not just a trick of the mind. It is a racial memory of a time when our reflections were not our own, and it is a dark prophecy of a time when they might not be again. This brings us to a piece of folklore that perfectly combines all the themes we've been discussing. It is the ultimate expression of the mirror as an active ritual tool, combining divination, portal opening, and spirit communication into a single terrifying act of summoning. We are, of course, talking about the legend of Bloody Mary. It is the most well-known and widely practiced piece of mirror folklore in the Western world. It has become a rite of passage for generations of children, a sleepover game played in darkened bathrooms, fueled by a mixture of bravado and genuine heart-pounding fear. But to dismiss it as a mere game is to ignore its deep roots in the principles of ritual magic. It is a classic necromantic rite, a ritual to call forth the dead, simplified and packaged for a playground audience. The ritual itself is remarkably consistent wherever it is told. You must stand before a mirror in a dark or dimly lit room. The darkness is key. It's a crucial first step. It helps to blur the line between the real and the reflected world, turning the flat surface of the mirror into a black, unknowable portal. You must be holding a single candle. The unstable light creates shifting shadows, making the environment perfect for tricking the eye and heightening the senses. And then you perform the invocation. You chant the name Bloody Mary a specific number of times, usually 3, a number of great significance in magic and religion, directly into the mirror. It is a direct invocation, a calling of a name, using the mirror as a medium, a kind of supernatural telephone, through which to call forth a specific entity from the other side. The consequences of a successful summoning are always described as horrific. They range from the sudden, terrifying apparition of a blood-drenched, screaming woman in the mirror to the truly violent. Stories abound of the spirit screaming curses at the summoner, of her eyes burning with rage, or even of her ghostly hands reaching out from the mirror to scratch out the summoner's eyes. In some versions of the legend, to successfully summon Mary means you are marked for death. The ritual is a high-stakes gamble with a malevolent, otherworldly force. You are knocking on a door you should not be knocking on. The identity of the entity known as Mary is a subject of intense debate, and this ambiguity is part of what makes the legend so powerful and so enduring. It can be adapted to fit local fears and histories. Some of the most common theories pin her identity to a specific historical figure. Many believe she is Queen Mary I of England, the daughter of Henry VIII. Her brutal and bloody persecution of Protestants in her quest to return England to Catholicism earned her the historical nickname Bloody Mary. Her life was filled with tragedy, a difficult childhood, several phantom pregnancies, and a loveless political marriage. Her ghost is said to be a wrathful, tormented spirit, forever angry at her fate. Others say she was a local witch, perhaps named Mary Worth or Mary Wales, who was executed centuries ago for practicing the dark arts. In this version, the summoning is an act of tapping into her vengeful spirit, a spirit still furious at her unjust death and eager to lash out at anyone foolish enough to disturb her rest. By calling her name, you are siding. In this version, the summoning is an act of tapping into her vengeful spirit, a spirit still furious at her unjust death and eager to lash out at anyone foolish enough to disturb her rest. By calling her name, you are siding with her persecutors and inviting her wrath. A third and perhaps more tragic and unsettling story tells of a young girl from a more recent time. She was the victim of a terrible car crash, or perhaps a sudden illness, and was mistakenly declared dead and buried alive. In a desperate attempt to be sure, her grieving parents had placed a mirror near her mouth to check for the faint trace of breath before sealing the coffin. When she awoke in the darkness, she screamed and clawed at the lid of her coffin until her fingers were raw and bloody. Her spirit is now attached to that mirror, or perhaps to all mirrors, a tormented soul forever clawed at the glass, trying to escape the horror of her own coffin. Regardless of the specific origin story you choose to believe, the legend serves as the ultimate cautionary tale about the misuse of arcane power. It transforms a potent ritual into a child's game with potentially lethal consequences. It is a stark and visceral warning about the dangerous power that lies dormant in every mirror in your home, a power that should not be trifled with, a door that is best left unopened. It is the final, terrifying lesson in the mirror's dark curriculum. If you stare into the abyss and call out a name, something from the abyss might just answer back. So far, we've journeyed through the shadowy realms of folklore, mythology, and ritual. We've treated the mirror as a magical object, a thing with inherent external power. But now we turn our gaze from the outer world to the inner one. We must look away from the supernatural and toward the psychological, because the mirror is not just a physical object. It is also one of the most powerful and enduring symbols for the human mind itself. In literature, it has been used for centuries to explore the complex landscapes of identity, truth, and the duality of our nature. At the same time, modern psychology offers compelling science-based explanations for the strange, unsettling things that happen when we stare at our own reflection for too long. In literature, the mirror is rarely just a mirror. It is a device for profound psychological exploration, an object that forces characters to confront who they really are, for better or for worse. Think of the moment in the novel Jane Eyre. Jane, an orphan who has suffered greatly, is about to be married to a man she loved, but she is deeply unhappy with the compromises she is making. She catches a glimpse of herself in a mirror, and she sees her own pale, terrified face. The mirror forces her to confront the truth of her own unhappiness, a truth she had been trying to ignore. The mirror shows her not what she wants to see, but what is real. The mirror is also a powerful arbiter of truth versus illusion, an object that can expose a hidden, corrupt reality lurking beneath a beautiful surface. This theme finds its most famous and brilliant expression in Oscar Wilde's masterpiece, The Picture of Dorian Gray. In the novel, a handsome and wealthy young man, Dorian Gray, makes a dark wish, that a beautiful portrait of him could age and show the marks of his sins, while he himself remains forever young and beautiful. The wish is granted. The painting functions as a kind of soul mirror. It absorbs all the sins of the hedonistic Dorian, allowing him to live a life of cruelty and debauchery, while his face remains as innocent as a child's. But the image on the canvas grows ever more hideous and monstrous with each wicked act. The portrait is the true reflection of his soul, a terrifying hidden record of his moral corruption, a truth he keeps locked away in an attic room until it ultimately destroys him. And of course, the mirror is a metaphor for duality, for the divided self, for the idea that we all have another side to our personality. This idea is taken to its most literal and imaginative conclusion in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass. Here, the mirror in Alice's living room is a literal portal to an inverted subconscious world where logic runs backward, chess pieces are alive, and identity is fluid and uncertain. Alice's journey through the looking-glass world is a journey into the irrational, dreamlike nature of her own mind, a place of wonder and confusion. But why does prolonged mirror gazing feel so strange, even for those of us who don't believe in spirits or magical portals? Psychology has some compelling answers. A fascinating 2010 study by psychologist Giovanni Caputo had participants stare into their own eyes in a mirror in a dimly lit room for 10 minutes. The results were astounding. A majority of participants reported seeing huge deformations of their own face. Their features seemed to melt, warp, or rearrange themselves. Many saw the face of an unknown person, an old woman, a child, or an ancestor. And nearly half of the participants reported seeing fantastical and monstrous beings. The experiment, in a controlled clinical setting, seemed to induce hallucinations that sound remarkably similar to the folklore of Bloody Mary. This is likely caused by a combination of known perceptual phenomena. One of the primary culprits is called the Troxler effect. This is a simple trick of the brain. When you fix your gaze on a single point, any unchanging stimuli in your peripheral vision will begin to fade from your perception. Your brain essentially decides it's boring, unimportant information and edits it out. So, as you stare intently at your own eyes in a mirror, the static, unchanging features of your face, your nose, your cheeks, the shape of your jaw can start to distort or disappear entirely from your perception. Your brain, which abhors a vacuum, will then try to fill in the missing information, often generating strange and unsettling new features out of the shadows. Add to this our brain's deeply hardwired tendency for pattern recognition, especially for faces. This is called pareidolia. It's the reason we see faces in clouds, in the patterns of wood grain, or in the craters of the moon. An old tarnished mirror, viewed in low, flickering light, is a perfect canvas for pareidolia. Your brain, struggling to make sense of the shadowy, indistinct image, might project faces or figures onto the surface that aren't really there, pulling them from the depths of your own subconscious mind, from your memories and your fears. This brings us to the psychomantium, a practice revived and studied by Dr. Raymond Moody, the psychiatrist who famously coined the term near-death experience. A psychomantium is a small, darkened chamber containing a comfortable chair and a large mirror, tilted at an angle so that it doesn't reflect the person sitting in the chair, but instead looks like a dark, empty void. The subject is encouraged to relax. Think about a deceased loved one and gaze into this darkness with the specific intention of making contact. Dr. Moody's research found that a significant majority of participants reported having powerful visionary experiences of their departed relatives. These weren't just vague feelings. They were often described as profound, interactive encounters that had a deeply positive therapeutic effect, helping people to process their grief and find a sense of closure. What's absolutely remarkable is that this modern clinical practice is nearly identical in its form and its function to the oracles of the dead used in ancient Greece thousands of years ago. Dr. Moody has, in effect, taken an ancient necromantic ritual, stripped it of its supernatural context, and reframed it in the modern language of psychology and grief therapy. It shows that the intention you bring to the mirror is just as powerful as the object itself in shaping your experience, proving that the line between magic and psychology is, perhaps, as thin and as reflective as a sheet of glass. In our modern era of scientific materialism, in a world of smartphones and space travel, you might think that the mirror's arcane, mysterious reputation would have faded into obscurity, but it hasn't, not really. The mystery has simply been integrated into new frameworks of inquiry. The fundamental questions we ask about the mirror remain the same, but the tools we use to investigate them have changed. The folklore has not disappeared, it has simply evolved. Paranormal investigators now point thermal cameras and EMF detectors at haunted mirrors, trying to capture ghostly energy with technology. Declassified documents from the Cold War reveal that our own intelligence agencies pursued psychic abilities with a rigor and a budget that would make Dr. John Dee proud. And at the furthest frontiers of theoretical physics, Scientists are using the precise language of mirror worlds to describe the very fabric of our universe. The mirror, it seems, continues to haunt us, from the seance room to the laboratory. The annals of modern paranormal research are filled with stories of famous haunted mirrors. There's the mirror at the Myrtles Plantation in Louisiana, a place often called one of America's most haunted homes. The mirror is said to hold the trapped souls of a mother, Sarah Woodruff, and her children, who were poisoned to death in the house. Visitors and staff claim that ghostly, child-sized handprints will reappear on the glass, moments after it has been cleaned. Then there are artifacts treated less like haunted objects and more like dangerous, contained entities. In the occult collection of the famous paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, there were several mirrors that were considered to be particularly dangerous. One, known as the Portal Mirror, was claimed to be an active gateway for demonic entities. According to the Warrens, these were not just historical curiosities or objects with residual energy. They were active threats, metaphysical weapons that had been used in dark rituals and had to be handled with extreme caution. They were kept covered and were regularly blessed with holy water to keep whatever was inside from getting out. But perhaps the most startling modern parallel to the ancient art of scrying comes from a place you might not expect: declassified U.S. government files. During the height of the Cold War, when tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were at their peak, the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency ran a multi-decade program codenamed Project Stargate. Its purpose was to investigate and potentially weaponize a psychic ability called remote viewing, the purported ability to perceive a distant, unseen target using only the mind. Functionally, this is identical to scrying. Imagine you could close your eyes in a quiet room in Maryland and accurately describe the layout of a secret new Soviet submarine base in Siberia. That is what the government spent millions of dollars trying to teach spies to do. Instead of gazing into a dark mirror, trained remote viewers would enter a meditative state in a sterile, featureless room and attempt to describe Soviet military bases, locate hidden hostages, or track down rogue agents. The project was officially terminated in 1995, with the government's public conclusion stating that it was never useful for producing actionable intelligence. This theory, while highly debated, suggests that upon public disclosure, the entity merely altered its name and concealed itself more deeply. This tactic is akin to a shell game, frequently employed with considerable success due to the public's lack of inquiry or demand for verification. But the final report contained a stunning admission. A rigorous statistical analysis of the thousands of experiments conducted over 20 years found that the results were statistically significant and could not be explained by chance or guessing. The phenomenon, they concluded, was real, even if it couldn't be reliably controlled for espionage. The American government had, for a time, become the world's most well-funded and technologically advanced group of scryers, using human consciousness itself as the reflective surface. The ability is within all of us. Anyone can learn to harness their abilities as a remote viewer. We all have this talent. This is a natural ability, and we only learn the extent of our own talent when we show up to practice. Organizations like the Monroe Institute, founded by Robert Monroe, provide courses to guide individuals toward altered states of consciousness and teach these very skills. Their courses facilitate personal exploration, emphasizing safety, ethics, and a scientific approach to understanding consciousness. And this brings us to the final mind-bending convergence of the mystical and the scientific, to explain one of the greatest mysteries in modern cosmology, the mystery of dark matter, the invisible, unknown substance that makes up roughly 85% of the matter in our universe. Some theoretical physicists have proposed the existence of a mirror world. Imagine our universe is like a house. We can see the furniture, the walls, the people inside. But we know, from its gravitational pull, that the house is much, much heavier than it should be. The mirror world hypothesis suggests that there is a second, invisible house occupying the exact same space, a parallel universe composed of its own set of mirror particles and governed by its own set of mirror forces, which coexists right alongside our own. This mirror world would be a perfect reflection of our own, interacting with our world only through the subtle and pervasive force of gravity. We can't see it, we can't touch it, but we can feel its weight, holding our galaxies together and preventing them from flying apart. Think about that stunning progression for a moment. The ancient Magus uses a polished obsidian mirror as a ritual tool to access the astral plane. The Cold War psychic spy uses the focused instrument of their own consciousness to access non-local information for strategic advantage. The theoretical physicist uses the elegant and complex language of mathematics to posit the existence of a parallel dimension, a literal mirror of our own, to explain a cosmic anomaly. The connection isn't that ancient mystics somehow predicted quantum physics. It's that the human mind, when confronted with the limits of what it can perceive, when it reaches the boundary of the known world, consistently and intuitively returns to the same powerful archetype to explain the unknown. The mirror has always been, and continues to be, our ultimate symbol for the boundary between the seen and the unseen. So what have we learned on this journey through the looking glass? Where has this path of folklore, magic, and science led us? The vast and complex lore of the mirror can be understood through three distinct, but deeply interlocking phases. First, there is the mirror as soul. This is its most fundamental and ancient role. The foundational belief that the reflective surface is a passive record of our spiritual essence. It is the belief born in that first encounter at the water's edge. This single idea is the bedrock for everything else. It explains the terror of the broken mirror that shatters the soulless vampire that casts no reflection, and the need for the shrouded mirrors in a house of mourning to protect the spirits of both the living and the dead. This is the mirror that sees the truth of who we are, a truth so profound that its image is considered a part of us. Second, there is the mirror as portal. This is its active, instrumental role. The mirror as a technology for witches, priests, and magicians. It is a tool to be used, a gateway to be deliberately opened, a conduit for summoning and communication. This is the mirror of the scryer, seeking glimpses of the future in its depths. It is the mirror of the Mesoamerican priest, communing with the god of the smoking mirror. It is the mirror of Dr. John Dee, transcribing messages from angels in his darkened study. And it is the mirror of the Bloody Mary ritual, a terrifying telephone to the abyss. This is the mirror that can be manipulated by those who know its secrets, a door that can be knocked upon. And third, there is the mirror as symbol. This is its psychological role, its function as a powerful metaphor for the inner world. It is a representation of the dualities of our own minds, of the conscious and the subconscious, the public self we show the world and the hidden self we keep locked away, like Dorian Gray's hideous portrait. It is a catalyst that, through known perceptual tricks like the Troxler effect, can bypass our rational filters and reveal the hidden, often monstrous, landscapes of our own consciousness. It reminds us that the strange other world we sometimes glimpse in the glass may in fact be a projection from within ourselves. These three faces, soul, portal, and symbol, are not separate. They are interwoven, each one reinforcing the others, like threads in a tapestry. The primal belief that the mirror holds the soul gives terrifying power to the idea that it can be a portal, and the uncanny psychological experiences the mirror produces make it a potent symbol for the hidden depths of the mind, which in turn fuels its mystical reputation and reinforces our belief that it is connected to the soul. The enduring enigma of the mirror lies not in what it shows us, but in the profound and eternal questions it forces us to ask. From the first human who knelt at a still pond tens of thousands of years ago, to the Cold War spy in a sterile viewing chamber, to the modern scientist scrawling equations on a blackboard, we have all gazed into that reflective surface, literally or metaphorically, and asked the same fundamental question: what lies beyond the veil of the visible? What is out there, just beyond my perception? Perhaps the most unsettling truth is not that the mirror shows us another world, but that it reflects the one constant in every observation we ever make, ourselves. Across millennia of human history, we see the same patterns emerge again and again. A new technology appears, be it a polished stone, silvered glass, a focused mind, or a mathematical theory, and we immediately use it to gaze into the unknown, to seek an advantage, to understand our place in the cosmos. We see the same rituals, repackaged for different eras. The shaman's trance in front of a firelit mirror becomes the psychologist's grief therapy session in a psychomantium. The magician's scrying mirror becomes the spy's mental discipline. The names and the tools change, but the fundamental human impulse to look beyond ourselves remains identical. And time again, our search for objective truth in that reflection is warped by what we bring to it. Our hopes, our deepest fears, our cultural biases, our ambition, our grief. It seems we are destined to repeat this process, to seek a definitive answer in a medium that can only ever show us an inverted copy of our own question. The answer, it seems, reflects as much about the person asking as it does about the object of our gaze. The world behind the glass remains a mystery. It always will. But the act of looking into it, of confronting that silent twin, continues to be one of our most profound and most unsettling ways of looking into ourselves. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, be careful what you look for in the dark, because you might just find it staring back at you. As we step back from the crossroads, remember, the story doesn't end here, because this is just the beginning. Searching for the knowledge and wisdom to unravel the mysteries of our universe. Unexplained sightings, spirits, and science. They are all connected in the grand tapestry of life. So remember, keep pulling at the threads, because this has been Crossroads of the Veil.